We're gonna talk about Godzilla Raids Again.
My God. I want to start off by saying about this film, I thought that this was going to be more serious, like Godzilla 1954. I went into this expecting like a more somber approach to a film, and holy...
Let me tell you something. This movie suffers from an identity crisis.
Okay, yeah, no, I can see that.
Because this movie wants to be like, I mean, Godzilla just came out the year before this movie came out. This came out in 1955.
Yes.
And they wasted no time. And so this movie wants you to take it seriously like the first one. And there are moments that they show you, look guys, we're serious. This is some dark shit that we're hitting on. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, it has the campiest, dumbest shit that you'll ever see.
Look, man, I gotta be honest.
Full on gimmick.
I thought I loved the first Godzilla for being dark and a little bit broody. And then Godzilla -1, I was like, you know what? This one's my favorite one. This was an awesome Godzilla flick. And then I saw this movie and I said, you know what? I take everything back.
Take everything back. By everything back, we mean we're not going to continue doing this show anymore.
No, I'm doing it by my lonesome.
This is the last episode. No, it's not that bad.
I loved this movie. I'm not going to lie to you.
This movie wants to be fun.
It's a charm for sure. It has a charm.
It's fun. It's fun. I'd make fun of it only because this movie is so vastly different than the first one.
For sure.
And the fact that this movie is not only just a direct sequel, but comes out the immediate year, and without missing a beat decides, we're throwing in another monster, guys. Like, it's not enough. We could have just had a Godzilla Raids Again implies that there's just Godzilla.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You're just there to watch a Godzilla movie. You're like, all right, right on. We were warned. Serizawa warned us in the first one. It's like, hey, there's a chance that, you know, the Pandora's box is open. These could come back. I mean, there could be another Godzilla. And it's like, all right, cool. So sure enough, there fucking is. Let's do this. Let's go. And then they're like, oh, by the way, now there's this creature named Anguirus.
I have a lot to say about Anguirus.
Anguirus, Angurio, or all the Anguri, all the different names that come out during one movie. You know, with some of these movies, I think that there is something to be said about, like, getting into the minutia, the art of the film, and kind of talking a lot about it. This
ain't
movie,
one of them?
This movie, there's so much story that happened off set that led to this movie being made that I think is far more interesting than the actual movie itself.
Awesome.
That I think because I've got a lot to say about the history of this movie and how it came to be. So I think it's totally fine if we jump around. There can be moments that we can talk about that stood out to us, that felt weird, or that we liked.
A moment that I need to talk about.
But as far as going shot for shot, let's not worry about it.
Cool.
I think the important thing to do would be to give the plot of this movie real quick. So, whoever wants to lead, Mark.
Yeah, I got this one. So,
all right.
In a nutsack.
God damn it, which we all technically start in.
In a nutsack. This movie starts off pretty much... I
was too slow for it.
Pretty much the same way that Godzilla -1 does, actually. We have...
just with an extra monster.
God damn it. We have a fighter pilot who is landing a plane on an island because of engine failure. How weird. That it parallels so perfectly. And wouldn't you know it, that island has Godzilla and also a second creature that, my God, I thought Godzilla's introduction in Godzilla 54 was terrible. I mean, by terrible I mean terribly shot, but perfect as a scene.
It's just a weird angle of the fella.
Yeah, so we have two fighter pilots, one who crashed his plane, the other is there to rescue him. And as they're standing in a little cove, which I love how, in comparison to the first movie, how ratchet the sets are in this film.
Yeah.
All right. So since which the thing with the sets being the way they are is because most of the movie of the original Godzilla was shot on site.
Right.
Most of this movie was filmed in a soundstage, or at least a lot of it. So there is a lot of just weird, like, I don't want to say like claustrophobic moments, but like weird, it's like, why are we only seeing these guys in one cave like area while all these monsters are supposedly fighting?
Mm-hmm.
So this one definitely feels a lot more like traditionally, well, like, okay, Power Ranger. We've compared like the Power Ranger aspect to Godzilla before, right?
Which is fair because we would not have Power Rangers without Godzilla.
Right. In Japan it debuted like in the 70s, so it was very close to this. But this is where you start to get some of that feel of that low budget to be able to mass produce, because these movies started coming out pretty frequently. Not this one necessarily, because there's that whole 10-year gap.
So if you're gonna mention the 10-year gap, get to the point that you want to get to, because I know there's something you want to talk about.
Yes.
But once you get there, I'm going to jump into why this movie feels so weird.
Yeah, that's fine. So with the low budget, obviously, you have the Godzilla and Anguirus bodysuits, but they also use hand puppets for these two creatures, which,
yes,
sure, it works for the distance shots when you're looking over a mountain and you see Godzilla there. Like, you can't really force perspective without some serious, like, force perspectiving, right?
Absolutely.
So that makes sense for the Godzilla hand puppet there. And when they and sure enough,
do you know why they had a lot of hand puppet usage in this movie?
There was damage to the suit, right?
So it's not because of damage to Godzilla's suit per se. The reason being is because of Anguirus because that actor is on his knees.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And it looks weird. So there's angles that they had to choose to shoot Anguirus to make sure you weren't just seeing, like, well, that's weird. Why would his feet be like that on the ground? So there's these weird perspective shots, and also the difficult thing was the original Anguirus suit. The shell is in two parts.
Oh, we noticed that.
You can see that a lot.
It flaps up around a lot.
It flaps a lot. And so the problem was they're like, oh no, this actually looks bad. And so they settled for close-up puppetry shots of Anguirus's face to make up for those moments. But because of that, they're like, we should also do it with Godzilla, because then we've got symmetry, and then it seems like intentional, which is not a bad
It's a good thought.
idea.
It's a good thought on paper.
It's a good thought. It was just poorly executed. Well, also at the same time, it's poorly executed. This is the first time that they've done something like this.
Yeah.
So, all right, Mark.
So
is there?
They also see they see Anguirus fighting Godzilla, and they're like, I don't know what the fuck. What is this thing? Like, this isn't. It doesn't look like Godzilla. So they go to scientists. Yeah. And the scientists are looking through all of their years of studies to figure out what kind of monster this is.
Do you want to mention the source that they use?
They use like the same big book encyclopedia of dinosaurs that I had when I was
dinosaurs.
I was like 7 years old. And
yes.
And they thumb over to the page of Ankylosaurus, and they're like, that's it. That is the Ankylosaurus that we saw. Now, here's the thing about Ankylosaurus is that they did not get right with Anguirus. I'm sorry, I'm going to go full dinosaur spectrum here.
Please do, Mark. It's one of my favorite things about you.
All right. So for starters, Anguirus, they say, is like 250 meters tall, right?
Sure.
Right.
Oh, or feet, sorry, whichever it was, however it translates. The average Ankylosaurus from foot to the top of their back, because they're quadrupeds, comes up to about eye level on a 6 foot tall man. That's one thing.
Interesting. I didn't realize that they were so. I mean, that's still big.
They're
but
big.
I mean,
They're big boys, but they're not.
I mean, that's a little bit like around the size of like a medium-sized rhino.
Yeah, they're
All right.
like the Triceratops in Jurassic Park. Think like that.
No,
size.
I mean, granted, if I see one of those out and about, I'd be like, "Holy shit!"
Well, all right.
I'm taking it home.
Well, so next thing they say is,
Mom, I got a new pet.
The next thing they say is that it's a carnivorous and aggressive species, neither of which are true.
No.
Third of all, tertiarily, the design of Anguirus. Okay, Ankylosaurus has 2 massive club-like balls on its tail
Yes.
that it uses to break legs and such. Also, they don't
Which is
have...
dope.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. It's awesome. I wish that they would have thought that when they did Anguirus, but it's not what Anguirus is. And then Anguirus is covered in spikes like a hedgehog.
Yeah.
Ankylosaurus had plates on their back. Not like a Stegosaurus, to be clear. They were like armor platings that laid flat on their backs, and then they had like a row of flat spikes along the edge, kind of like nails, but nothing like, not what Anguirus had. And also Anguirus's shell is like a turtle shell. They imply that Ankylosauruses have turtle shell type things, and as you said, the damn thing wasn't even secure to Homeboy's back. He was doing like rolls and shit, and you can see it flapping apart. So yes,
I mean, so here's the thing though. Like, where I give it credit, and I do appreciate that they at least took this amount of time to go into trying to explain what Anguirus was or is, I do like, because at no point do we look at Anguirus and we're like, that is say it for me, the
Ankylosaurus.
Ankylosaurus, thank you. I had it in front of me and I was like, I'm gonna have a stroke trying to say
Look,
that
man,
word.
it's okay. Everyone I know has a stroke trying to say most dinosaur names.
Yeah, Ankylosaurus. So, but none of us look at Godzilla and go, well, Godzilla's a T-Rex, except for the people that made the Matthew Broderick 1998 movie. But it is a further corruption of nature. You know,
Yeah.
that is so I get where they're coming from and using Anguirus as like an Ankylosaurus as like Anguirus's like origin story.
Sure.
Because Godzilla very much was kind of like a T-Rex kind of mythical thing.
It was a Godzillasaurus.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I will.
So
I will
I
actually argue on one small segment that you said.
Okay, go ahead.
You said that he's a T-Rex according to the Matthew Broderick one, but I will say with what -1 did with him at the beginning when he was a
It is far more T-Rex.
I would say he was definitely more
Yeah.
T-Rex like. And honestly,
Well, I don't have a problem with that. It's one of my favorite things about
-1.
well, -1 does it. But the Matthew Broderick film, I think, got the inspiration for Zilla was because of the other film that came out around. I don't see. It's the other thing. I'm curious. They must have gotten inspiration from the original kind of interpretation of Godzilla being a corrupted, like mutated being.
yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be an iguana.
But then they just stuck with it the entire time. Like, well, this is it. This is what happens. It's like, well, could have been better. It could have been worse too. I mean, hey, at least they made him big. Like, I'm just like, at least you went full bore with the size.
I want to say
Also, you gotta think. I also look at it as like a product of the time.
Yeah.
What's the biggest movie around that same time? Jurassic fucking Park. Everyone loves fucking dinosaurs.
I would if I had the opportunity. You can bet I would.
Yeah, I mean, wait, what?
Your wording was everyone loves fucking dinosaurs, and
everyone fucking loves dinosaurs.
No, you said everyone loves fucking dinosaurs.
I mean, yes, you know.
And so to reiterate, I would, given the opportunity.
You watched that sitcom Dinosaur, or whatever it was called, where everyone was in the dinosaur costumes.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces.
And you were getting off to the mom, weren't you?
I'm getting off to the dad.
No, there you go.
So I do want to give them credit in one aspect of this, with their big book of dinosaurs and their Xerox copied diagrams out of a children's book. They did have Mr. Upset Scientist from the first movie. That's in the first movie was like, we need to save this. We have to save this creature and study it and learn from it. In this movie, he's just kind of like, dude, we are so fucked.
He's just like, guys,
this is gonna happen. You have no idea how bad this is.
This is bad. He's just like, I give up.
And then to make things worse for him, I love that they're like, all right, dim the lights. We got some footage we want to show you from what happened last time.
So here, we're going to show you pretty much the events from the entire last movie.
Hey, Doc, you remember watching this happen first person?
Oh, yeah, see, I was there first person. I saw it happen with my own eyes.
It was terrible.
And I only say it that way because this movie has some of the worst ADR I have ever heard. This movie, I think, is where so much of the bad lip reading trope comes from.
Oh, you watched it in English. Okay.
Oh, no.
I watched it. So Jose and I watched it in Japanese the first night.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second time I watched it, I was like, I'm going to watch the American version. I'm going to see, like, not even the American version, just the dubbed version.
Right.
Because once again, like with all these movies, there are multiple versions.
Yeah.
Which I will get into in the history. I hope y'all are ready because Jesus fucking Christ. This movie has the worst continuity errors you will ever see. So, Mark, anything else you want to add? Real quick?
I did not realize how long of a scene that them saying this is an Ankylosaurus was. It was like a 12-minute scene.
No, the level of exposition that happens in this movie is laughable.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, and it's mostly them double speaking and saying, oh yeah, see, I also concur. It feels like when you're trying to write a paper, but you're like, I'm nowhere near 800 words.
It's like those Family Guy sketches that just don't end.
Yeah, which is most of Family Guy nowadays. Yeah. All right, Jose, before I get into it, is there anything that you would like to say real quick?
No, I think we hit it all.
What?
I think we hit everything.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, real quick, before we get, start talking about some of like our favorite ridiculous moments, I would like to take a little bit to talk about the history of this movie and kind of how this movie came to being, because I find that to be the most interesting story. So, the idea of doing Godzilla Raids Again was pretty much decided upon at the celebration party of the first Godzilla movie. Like, as that party is going on, they're like, hey, so we're going to do another one. Are you in? You in? Like, this is what we're thinking about doing. And they're like, oh my gosh, I mean, I don't know. And so out of the 4 original people, and by that I mean the producer, the director, the score, the music producer, only 2 people come back. And it's because Toho wanted to take Ishiro Honda because they really liked how he just has an innate ability for the human element of storytelling. So they had him doing a bunch of romances, and he was deep into doing a movie. And I'm just remembering it. I couldn't remember the name of it, so I looked it up. The movie he was doing was called Love Tide, which just kind of one of your romances.
They
Just
turned him from a monster movie maker to a Hallmark Channel maker.
pretty much, but it's kind of where his strong suit was. So he was kind of happier doing. I mean, at least I think he was happier doing it because he did tons of romances.
Okay.
But it's not that he didn't want to come back. It's just that they were like, Godzilla, this is it. Like so many, like people are loving this movie. We have to do another one. And so immediately they're writing the script like the night of the party into the next day.
They're just getting shit-faced and coming up.
And so
what if we fought an Ankylosaurus, man?
Yeah. So they bring in, I'm trying to see Moto Yoshioda. Sorry. Ignorant, dumb English speaker here. He really liked sci-fis. Like they're like, this is our guy. He likes sci-fis. Let's get him in here to do this and just get weird with it. Like let's have some fun. And they wanted to have. They were like, all right, well, let's go full bore. Let's have it because if we're gonna say that there's another Godzilla that just kind of came about. Let's have there be other species that also, let's make it this whole, within the first, like early on, I mean, they're talking about Hollow Earth stuff. So they're like, let's start bringing up these mythical creatures. Let's start doing some stuff.
Get fucking weird, dude.
Let's get fucking weird. Let's get fucking weird. And this movie has none of the original. I think there's one moment where they reference original score from the first movie, but the other musical director that they had came on had nothing to do with the last movie and had too much of a jazz background, and so he just kind of was like, I don't know, let's make this stuff kind of upbeat, have a little bit foreboding, so which played into the movie having this weird kind of overall tone. Where it's like, are they wanting to be serious or are they wanting to be kind of lighthearted and like monster fights? Because like one of the tricks in the movie that when I say is like one of the darker points of the movie is when you see them turning all the lights out in the city. Right. To get them to like deter Godzilla away, like get him to go away, which was something that they would do to throw off pilots. So they're like, they can't firebomb us if they can't see us. And that was kind of like, so there's these weird moments where they're like, oh yeah, let's totally throw that in and, like really kind of lean more into like our war, kind of like our darkness about like the inspiration of Godzilla. But then they're just wanting like ridiculous like fights, like Godzilla trying to rip Anguirus' mouth open kind of thing. And just all this.
That wasn't way this one, was it?
I think it was.
Oh no, you're right. You're right. Yeah,
it's like pulling and it doesn't look good. It
looks like claymation. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it looks really, really rough.
So, can I interject on this part?
Yes, please go right ahead.
So, feeding into this whole like weird, what is this movie supposed to be conveying? Right? Yes. During one of these blackout scenes. We see the new couple, the couple that is the overarching, like, heart of this story, I guess. Going out to dance during this blackout, right? And everyone's kind of like, we're gonna, I mean, really feed into that jazz aspect of the score writer this time. But yeah, they're playing this like sweet jazzy music. They're all dancing, and everyone's like, all right, as long as we keep quiet enough, Godzilla's going to stay away. And then almost immediately it's like, hey guys, we fucked up. Godzilla's on his way here now. Yeah. And then like as soon as they evacuate the building, the whole thing just collapses because Godzilla's busting through shit.
Yeah. And this movie gets really deep into like talking about like the fishing community. There's a lot of talk about, well, if Godzilla comes over here and destroys us, I mean, we're going to lose all of our fishing vessels. It's like, that's what you're worried about.
Every time he comes up out of the water, he kills a whole bunch of the fish. What are we going to do for food?
So real quick, so since getting into the history about this movie, so there's a lot of strangeness with like the monster fighting, but at the same time, this movie has a massive cultural significance because this movie then leads to the inspiration of all the other monster fighting movies. Like this idea of kaiju battle movies is because of this, because of Godzilla Raids Again. But the fascinating thing was, and you mentioned this earlier about how Godzilla doesn't look like Godzilla. Godzilla looks weird.
Godzilla looks like a puppy in this one.
Godzilla looked so strange, in fact, that when it came time to do the American release of this movie, they did not call Godzilla.
Right.
They called this movie Gigantus, the fire monster. It's an entire different monster. And on top of that, like there's moments where they're like talking like, oh yeah, no, this is Godzilla came through, but it's also completely like they do the recap of the movie, but this monster's completely different. Well, he has nothing to do with this. And on top of that, there's an extra weird thing because they decide that Gigantus and Anguirus are the same species.
Right.
In the American dub.
Which makes no goddamn sense.
It makes no sense, but it works in the sense that that's how they're like, well, this is why they're fighting. Because they're the same species and they're fighting to be out there. It's a territorial thing. They're fighting to be alpha kind of thing. So they do the real, even weirder thing of there are moments in the American version where Godzilla's roar is the same as Anguirus.
Right. And I will say, to the credit of Toho, right? This is Toho?
Yes.
To their credit, Toho did intend for this to be a different Godzilla. Same species, different creature. But we just, we're Americans and we can't fathom the idea of two people sharing the same name. Despite every, major character and everything ever being named Jack or something like that.
Let me tell you something, Jack.
Did you ever... We've talked about this, but you remember the idea that Jack from all of the fairy tales and nursery rhymes, it's all the same Jack. It's like Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack sat on a candlestick or whatever.
Yes, I think we talked about that.
Yeah, but it's all the same Jack. That's basically what's happening here. It's all the same Godzilla.
Yeah.
But
one of the other things. So there was a mistake that was made in this movie as to why it feels weird.
Yeah.
They filmed this movie at 18 frames per second.
Okay.
By accident.
What's the significance
there? There are shots that are filmed slower, but they weren't meant to be shot slower. And so, but then the other cameras were filming at the correct speed.
Oh, geez.
So there's this weird whirling kind of sped up action that happens.
That explains a lot.
From scene to scene.
I didn't know that, but that explains a lot. There was a lot of that during the fight against Anguirus, where I was like, man, that just even for moving at a normal pace, that looked weird.
Yeah.
For Anguirus scrambling across the floor, which, by the way, I got to give mad props to the suit guy that did that. So if you're still alive out there, thank you for your service. You goddamn. Now, I want to say
also this movie, so this film, despite it being Toho's fourth highest grossing film of that year, was bad enough that there was a dry spout from Godzilla movies for 8 years.
From 64 to 56, yeah. or six. Wait,
50. Flip
56,
it, reverse it.
56 to 64.
Oh,
Yes.
all right, Miss Elliott.
But so during this time period, the in between of their being no Godzilla movies, this is where the Rodan and the Mothra movies come in.
Yes.
Toho starts focusing on other monsters other than Godzilla.
Rodan came out the same year as this one, didn't he? Or the year after?
Rodan. Let me see. Rodan
was
came
56
out
or
in
57.
56.
Yeah, so
Yep,
that came
Rodan
out
was
the
out
same
in
year.
56. Yeah.
Or the year right after this. But and I gotta be honest, I think that them taking that time to focus on other monsters was the best step they could have taken.
It was the best step they could have taken, but it's also then leads to the strangest comeback for Godzilla.
I think
Because
we can talk about that once we come back to that.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes, we're gonna talk about that movie later because we need to spend proper time on it. It's fucking ridiculous. But the sequel to this movie is Godzilla versus King Kong.
King Kong versus Godzilla.
King Kong versus Godzilla. My bad. Like immediately after, like the third movie. Like
Here's something that I think is interesting when you bring that up. Because the way the names appear is important. It wasn't Godzilla versus King Kong. It was King Kong versus Godzilla.
Correct, because Godzilla is the bad guy.
Right, and then
Yeah.
there was also Mothra versus. There was
There is an entire series of Godzilla movies where Godzilla is second on the bill.
And I think it's because at that point they needed other monsters' names billeted first to help them sell tickets to those films.
Maybe, but I do know it is because when Godzilla is second on the bill, it's usually because he's the villain in that movie.
Yeah. Well, and then we get this is before the champion era of Godzilla. This was just Godzilla was pissed off at Anguirus and just tore him a new one.
Yeah.
Which
I see you. We gonna throw hands.
Which also
That's
I want to talk about. Okay, Godzilla fighting Anguirus. It was a brutal fight. Half of it, yes, was done with puppets, and I find something very endearing about them using hand puppets.
It was. I do like the practicalness of it, also because there were a lot of issues with both suits.
Right.
Apparently, the suit from the first Godzilla movie was not usable, which is crazy to me. After a year, they're just like, well, this suit, we can't use it.
We can't. It's fucked up.
So they had to redo the Godzilla suit. On top of that, all the spikes on Anguirus' back are paper.
I was gonna say because they were like falling off and crumbling throughout the whole
That
movie.
makes sense then.
They're falling off. They're falling off. They're breaking. The nice thing is because it kept the cost of the suit down, so any repairs could be done quickly.
Well, they just got a guy in the corner rolling giant joints to put in there.
Just giant cones.
So
they actually found an ice cream cone maker off the street, and they're like, "You want a job?" And they're like, "Sure."
I know it's such a campy thing, but the action shots between the two puppets where they very clearly did that old style cartoon thing where they have just the same background like like rushing past over and over again. That's what they did with the hand puppets at that point too.
True. And
I think that it was just God.
One of the things I do want to mention about this is because this is one of those special effects things that I find so incredibly fascinating. Also, I just want to say that pacing in a movie is very important. And this movie has one of the worst third acts I have ever seen in a movie because of its pacing. So the
Brandon turned
what's
into
his name? What's his name? Yeah, I did. Dang it. Kobayashi.
Dang it.
Dang it. Kobayashi.
I'm keeping that in just so you
Once
know.
again, there is a sacrifice moment of a main character to take down Godzilla while he's in the icy mountains.
Mhm.
Like, you know, like he's in the mountains and they're like, let's bury him. Let's bury him in ice. Like, that's our way. We're going to freeze him. And that way we'll bury him and he'll never come out again. And so
Until the next time he gets out.
the main character sacrifices himself by, you know, crashing, right? It was, I'm trying to,
It wasn't the main character, it was his goofy sidekick friend.
Right, it wasn't his main it wasn't
This
the main
goof-
character, it was his sidekick.
it was-
his fun sidekick who was fun the entire movie, and I love him. I thought he was great.
And
But he attempts. Godzilla's about to use its atomic breath, and Kobayashi crashes into the mountaintop, killing himself, but then creates an avalanche to engulf Godzilla, which is crazy. This is another one of the dark moments that they actually showed, like a kamikaze move.
Yeah.
Like, crazy that they did it. But the problem is, so any other film director would just be like, this is it. We're burying Godzilla. We're going full bore. Like, let's do it. It's only a small avalanche that gets created by Kobayashi sacrificing himself, and then they leave and come back to refuel and to bring more firepower.
look, man.
And it's so bad. It throws off the whole speed and like urgency of the end of the movie. And then on top of that, they had a Godzilla animatronic that was supposed to be walking, or trying to move through the mountains and through the ice and try to get out of the avalanche, but it broke. And so there's just a shot of a static Godzilla with its arms like T-Rexing. And they're like, look at him. Isn't he menacing? We've got to bury him. Meanwhile, he doesn't even flinch.
Look at that sick son of a bitch down there just enjoying destroying everything. So I do want to say, we did kind of gloss over the death of Anguirus, because that's when the rest of the movie just kind of died off.
It dies so really hard.
Anguirus, this again, awesome fight sequence, ridiculously over the top. They're puppeting half the shit, and Anguirus gets his neck torn open while they're hand puppeting.
Yeah.
Gets his hand, and then Godzilla kicks him into a ditch and then sets him on fire. And I'm looking at that.
Sets his body on fire with his atomic breath. And you're like, whoa.
I'm watching that. I'm like, whoa, this movie just got turned up to an 11. And then we find out that they're heading to Hokkaido and everything grinds to a standstill.
He's going after the fisheries.
Oh, he's hungry.
He's hungry. I get it.
He's not kidding. This movie grinds to a screeching halt as soon as they get there, because they go back and forth three times.
Then they want to focus on the love story, and there's this oh man, it starts getting into the day-to-day life of these people, and you're like,
I don't really care.
This was a hard turn. I always say, with the Godzilla movies, I love the human element. I know a lot of people, especially with the legendary series, people are like, stop telling me human stuff. I just want to see monsters smash each other.
I'm one of those people. I will fully admit.
I'm on the other side. I like the build up. I like the human stuff in between. I like the kind of the coexistence of it's like it's like the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla song, and it's like the folly of man. I like the folly. I like just
Oh yeah, that
us
song's
getting
nice, by the way.
Oh yeah, that song's a banger.
Look, I can appreciate that this is supposed to be the folly of man as much as anybody else.
It's a love story, and then there's a company dinner and all this stuff, and
well, we also
even for me, I'm just like, why the fuck does any of this matter right now?
Here's where my "what the hell is happening" moment came in. There's a scene where we see the inside of a police van transporting prisoners.
Oh yes.
And the prisoners decide, well, there's a giant monster running rampant. This is the perfect time for us to break out of jail.
Which
they do.
Is smart.
Sure, for sure. And then we get this sequence where we follow these 3 prisoners who, through very Three Stooges-esque antics, end up stealing a gasoline truck and crashing it into a reactor.
It is one of the craziest non-intentional Rube Goldberg devices for a movie.
I just remember I was sitting there next to Angel and we're watching this, and we finally get to this. We get through this whole build-up. I'm thinking oh, maybe these three prisoners are going to try and help save the world or something. Maybe that's why they're important here. And then the truck blows up.
Go full on prisoners from the Batman movies?
Yeah. And then
when they give me that detonator.
Give me that detonator out the window.
I'm better. Yep. I'm a better person.
I was just astounded that they introduced these 3 prisoners, and we took a pretty significant journey with them, only to have them crash a truck into a reactor that attracts Godzilla and Anguirus to fight on the island. And it was just... so many poor decisions were made with the writing of this film.
Hey, you know what's cool? We just escaped the fucking prison van. Let's go kill ourselves.
Let's fucking kill ourselves. Who even gives a shit, bro?
Yeah. Oh boy.
It's speaking of the history of things. It's funny. This is surprisingly not the first time I'd ever heard the name Hokkaido when referring to the city in Japan. Because there was an anime that me and Angel watched together that took place in Hokkaido, and I was like, there's no way that it's always winter in Hokkaido based on that anime, because the whole thing took place in winter. And I was like, then I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, Godzilla's literally in a frozen wasteland. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
So looks like that anime got it right. I guess the Japanese know a thing or two in Japanese.
Speaking of people that don't know a thing or two about in Japanese, though, let's go back to the American version of this movie.
Yes, let's.
Because there is a fun little thing that I think is fascinating that I didn't know about until I started doing a deeper dive.
Would you call it an Easter egg?
I wouldn't call it an Easter egg so much as I would call it a factoid.
Okay. I like factoids.
A fun factoid.
Like
a fun factoid. Jose, as you know, with any dub of a movie, that a lot of times that we just kind of, especially nowadays, we've gotten to the point where dubs are pretty good, where you can get decent, accurate translations of movies, and it doesn't take you out of it too much.
Right.
This, as we know, was not the case back then, and is why there is such a lampooning of bad lip readings and crazy, nonsensical dialogue that ends up happening. And I will be honest that for me, being the ignorant person that I am, I just assumed that they would have people, just voice actors or any old actor, but whoever was available, show up. They were given a script of lines that they had to read, and then they would fit it in the best that they could. It turns out I could not have been more wrong. one of the voice actors for the English dub of this movie has quite, I'm going to say, a sci-fi lineage to him. And I'm not going to let Mark guess because I had talked to him about this before, but Jose, would you like to try to take, and I'll give you 3 opportunities. Anybody that comes to mind that had prominence as a young, hungry actor who did sci-fi mostly for TV in the 60s.
All right,
and then subsequently to the
home.
70s.
Listeners at home, pause the episode. I want you to think hard about this and put in your answer.
Before.
Take out your tablets, punch in your answers, hit submit, and then hit continue.
Yeah, I hate it.
All right, it's okay. It's all right.
Shatner.
Nailed it. It was Will Shatz.
Billy Shat.
He shat all over this.
Who did you end up giving the voice over?
No, it was George Takei.
It was George Takei.
Oh, okay, that's better.
And so there is a rather infamous dialogue moment that George Takei is kind of like, people don't
the
really.
Oh my thing?
It's not. It's not the oh my thing. Which is not from Star Trek. It is a line in the English dub where the best way to say it is the term banana oil was used.
Oh,
where they say, "Oh, banana oil," or not even that. They just say "banana oil" to something that he said, that another character said, and because it fit the lip reading of it, which George Takei was like, "Well, it comes from the word, so it's bacaro." I'm guess. Bakayaro. Bacaro, or I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I'm a dumb, ignorant white person. I'm trying my very best. But it lined up perfectly. And essentially it's like the American version of poppycock, or that's foolish, or just and it's an extremely outdated expression. So, so he was one of the main voiceover dubs for this movie.
Well, if I'm not mistaken,
I thought it was ridiculous.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, what would happen with a lot of these old Japanese shows is they wouldn't even have a script. They would have to just kind of go off of what they saw. They would try to
do their very best to interpret what was being said and then fit it. They were absolutely showing up and essentially just doing improv on the spot.
Well, that's
crazy.
There was a TV
Which
show,
is
back
why
in the...
you would have a lot of people go right. See, and then the crazy exposition and double speak and all this weirdness that would happen. It's just because, well, we're just trying to fill in the like they're talking, and it'd be weird if we were like, you see, the mouth moving and they go, "Correct, sir," and it's like, well, hold on, that doesn't match up at all. What did he say?
So there are two anime series that are notorious for this, to the point that they've been called out for it. So there was an anime back in the late 80s called Samurai Pizza Cats over here in America, right? General idea that... Have you heard of this one?
I haven't heard of Pizza Cats, but there's another one that I'm thinking of.
It's so great, but like their whole premise is they're cats that work at a samurai, like at a sushi or a pizza shop in some animal world. And they're also superheroes. Anyway, the opening...
What?
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty fucking great. The opening credits in the American dub say like basically they say, we don't have a script for the show, so we're just kind of doing the best we can.
Right. Okay.
Like they actually have characters saying this to the audience as the credits are rolling. Now, the other one that is a notorious which I believe still holds the title of the worst dub of all time, is an anime called Ghost Stories.
But Ghost Stories was intentionally trying to be ridiculous.
Yes and no.
It was. Hold on, let me see if it's the same one.
It wasn't originally supposed to be, but they just, like, at the time did not have the money for the scripts to come overseas, or the scripts were destroyed. One of the two.
Yeah, because the whole thing was like the dub producers were like, just go. Yeah,
they would put them in a booth. They'd put them in a booth and say, "All right, whoever is here, let's just do what we can." And I've got to be honest with you, it is some of the funniest shit I have ever watched on TV.
I would agree. It's of the best.
And that is honestly one of my favorite parts of watching old Japanese movies, is when we get the English dubs where things are just wrong.
Yeah.
So this movie, I mean, honestly, like I've said basically everything I need to say about this movie. It, scientific inaccuracies abound. Real slog of a third act, as you said. But the fight between Anguirus and Godzilla, in my opinion, makes up for most of it. And then, watching Godzilla break through the building at the jazz party, that was also a pretty satisfying moment for me. Just because it's like, I couldn't have a life.
Jazz.
I like jazz. I like jazz as a person. It's just, why do they get nice things and I don't? And if I can't have nice things, they should be destroyed by Godzilla.
Spoken like a true American.
Thank you. I worked on that for days.
Good. I'm glad you.
I sat there thinking, like, man, how can I make this all about me? And here we are. I did it.
Wait, is this the first time?
Yeah.
And it won't be the last.
It's the first time. Yeah, it's never happened before, and it'll never happen again.
No, it'll happen all the time.
The other... Okay, actually, I do want to say one other thing about Godzilla when he gets buried up to his neck in snow, and he's just kind of like... You can see him kind of kicking, trying to get back out of the snow, and like there's a point where his foot kind of slides through, and you're like, oh, he's gonna get out, and then he doesn't, and it was really disappointing.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed. I wanted Godzilla to get out and be like, hey, no, don't do that.
Yes, this is what happens is he gets out of the snow and then he goes and fights the mech suits in that anime movie. I fucking remember the name of the name.
The Planet Eater?
I think that's what it is.
God, I'm excited to talk about those ones. That's gonna be fun.
I think I might be on the minority of liking Singular Point.
I haven't watched it yet. That's one I definitely want to watch and talk with you guys about.
Which one?
Singularity Point.
Singular Point.
Oh yeah, we'll do it.
We'll get there eventually. Right now we're on movie 3 of 87, but we'll get there.
I mean, I think we've said all that we can say about this.
Yeah, this one really didn't have much to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, all the history stuff and the background stuff I've found far more interesting than the movie. I find absolutely fascinating. So we were talking about Ishiro Honda.
Yeah.
Being the original Godzilla.
Yeah.
See who he comes back for?
King Kong.
He comes back for King Kong versus Godzilla, and King Kong escapes.
Good. God damn, that's great.
He takes a break from his artistic romance films and is like, I want to make a big ape movie.
I heard you guys is making a movie about a big gorilla. And also Godzilla.
Why are you swizzling your finger in your belly button while you're talking about this?
You know, a fun fact is Godzilla was originally based off of the word gorilla. And now you're taking a gorilla and making him fight my gorilla dinosaur. I want in on this.